The best way to predict the future is to create it. There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They are bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow strive for and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to Arise News. It's Thursday, the 23rd of February. I'm Charles Aniagulu in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. This is Arise News Now. The main headlines this morning: fresh talks underway to try and solve the crisis in Syria as opposition groups demand to meet face to face. The Naira begins bouncing back. It's making gains on the parallel market. And we'll bring you all the latest on the preparations for the 89th Academy Awards. Our top story this hour: talks between the Syrian regime and opposition groups begin today in Geneva, but there's little hope among officials that much will be achieved. This is the latest round of negotiations while life in Syria continues to worsen for those who remain in the country. A ceasefire is currently in place and the opposition is expected to push for this to be extended. The group spokesman is also asking for a direct meeting with the government.
We want to see real seriousness at the negotiation table. Therefore, we are calling for direct negotiations to save time. Because every day, that is costly to us, costs the Syrians in lives, in hunger and in siege. In truth, it's a crime not seen in the history of humanity, but it's happening today in Syria.
In the Iraqi city of Mosul are continuing to flee their homes in the west of the city as the offensive by government forces enters a fifth day. The area is the last remaining stronghold in Iraq for the so-called Islamic State. Hundreds of people are being transported on buses by federal police to 12 miles south of Mosul, where camps have been set up. U.S. troops are backing the offensive, with several wounded by IS fighters who are leaving booby traps behind as they retreat.
During our search of the houses, we found this bombed house and this booby-trapped vehicle waiting for the troops, containing a bottle of oxygen, which is not real oxygen. It contains chlorine. They put it under the ground to filter the water. They transformed it to make a bomb, and at the same time they transformed the farming tractor into a booby-trapped vehicle, and they installed bombs inside of it and on top of it. We've defused it, and it's now safe.
Now, here in Nigeria, changes to the foreign exchange regime are beginning to have an impact, with the Naira extending its gains on the parallel market. It appreciated by 14 Naira to 501 to the dollar. That was stronger than the 515 the previous day and 525 on Monday. Foreign currency speculators are now rushing to sell. The United States is committed to stepping up military assistance to Nigeria. That's according to the commander of AFRICOM. General Thomas Walthauser says the U.S. will assist with training, intelligence sharing, and building the capacity of the Nigerian military in its fight against insurgency. Meanwhile, Nigeria's acting president, Yemi Osibanjo, has appealed to America for more help in the fight against terrorism. He says the time has come to deepen the long-standing relationship between the two countries. Mexico has condemned new deportation guidelines issued by the United States. The new rules include sending undocumented people to Mexico, even if they are not Mexicans. Almost all illegal immigrants would be subject to deportation, but Mexican officials are pushing back, with the foreign minister saying they cannot accept a decision being imposed on them by another government. The U.S. Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, is in Mexico for talks with President Enrique Peña Nieto to try and ease the most serious rift between the two neighbors in recent years. Now, thousands of people have been gathering near Cairo for the funeral of a blind sheikh who recently died in a U.S. jail. Omar Abdul Rahman was linked to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. He died of natural causes at the age of 78 in a federal medical center in North Carolina, where he was serving a life sentence on several terrorism-related charges. The sheikh continued to be seen as a spiritual leader even after his conviction in 1995.
We would have loved him to come back while he was still alive, so we could kiss his head and feet, but he has returned dead. All his words were right words for God. He never encouraged violence or terrorism.
Well, time for a short break, but do stay with us. I'll be right back with all the business news. And also tune in all through this week for live updates from our team in Los Angeles, bringing you all the latest from the Oscars.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Then think Zenith, one of the biggest in Nigeria, with assets over $16 billion, listed among the 20 most influential brands in the world, and winner of Best Bank in Corporate Governance. The most customer-focused bank in Nigeria, a success built on 3 foundations, dedicated to people, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
There is nothing as symbolic as a door. It shuts to protect you and opens to give you much more. Everyone wants to succeed, not just count pennies. When life gets tough, I remember a few things. Difficulty and struggles are part of what life brings. Your strength comes from the support around you. A true friend believes in what you do, there to hold your hand through any weather. I found my partner, and we walked through doors together.
Diamond, your bank.
Welcome back to Arise News Now, coming to you live from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now to business news, and in the oil industry, OPEC officials have hailed the implementation of their agreement to cut oil production. Brent crude is up by more than 20% since OPEC agreed last year to put the brakes on output, a deal that was later joined by Russia, Mexico, and several other non-members. But can this confidence be sustained? Our business analyst, Bode Oshosami, spoke to Arise News anchor David Glencorse in our London studio.
The important thing, like was stated at the International Petroleum Week conference taking place in London by the Qatar Energy Minister, is that the amount of oil held in storage, reducing that amount, the stockpiles of oil in storage, is the most important factor to watch to be able to answer any question in terms of what is going to happen in the near term. And when Mr. Barkindo, the Secretary General, was also interviewed on Tuesday, and he said he's very confident that the cuts are yielding the necessary impacts that were envisaged. And at a later meeting, I believe on Wednesday at OPEC, they were able to discover that 90% of January production adhered to these cuts. So you have a 90% compliance already in January, and then for OPEC, and then for non-OPEC, that's for the allies, you have about 60% compliance, which is quite good. But having said that, the stockpiles keep going up. If you look at the January figures, you can see the US stockpiles are going up, the inventory is still going up. That is also possibly because the prices are high, and whenever prices are relatively high, we begin to see a very quick uptick in rig counts, quick uptick in stockpiles. And what that may indicate is much more needs to be done than just the cuts we have now.
Well, what part does the United States play in this entire equation?
Well, a lot. The new Trump government has said quite often, I remember Ryan was interviewed sometime last week, and he said energy independence is one of the key pillars of the 200-day plan that they have. They want to ensure that the United States stops importing oil. That means they're going to be producing a lot. There's a lot of fracking. There's also a lot of money going into the United States. Funding is beginning to become much more available for exploration and production activities. So we're seeing a situation where there's going to be much more oil, this time the US being the key driver of that expansion in global production. And what that means is, of course, you're also seeing shale discoveries, more shale discoveries than before. We know there's better technology. So what that means is that this puts pressure on OPEC's efforts to try and get that equilibrium back, because OPEC is trying to get the equilibrium as quickly as possible.
So this glut in the market, I mean, has it been mopped up?
Obviously, it hasn't. It's much larger, I think, than was initially thought. And if the data that we see is to be believed, I would think you would need maybe another 6 months. The initial strategy of OPEC was for the initial 6 months you have cuts. Either they have to increase the cuts, which is unlikely, or they will have to sustain this for a longer period.
So it's phase 2 coming up.
Yeah, I think there will be a phase 2. I mean, still early days. The thing to do is to watch these stockpiles. If we begin to see them coming down, but I don't think that will be the case. And most people are saying there's likely to be either a phase 2 or prices could go up after a while.
And oil prices have been dropping on worries of swelling US stockpiles.
Well, oil prices have been volatile. I would say going up and going down like they did last year. This year even more than last year. You know, it's been between 55 and 60 for a while. Even today it went up almost to 56.5 and came down again. So it's been trying to creep up, and we've had a rally actually in the last month or so of over about 20% increase since the cuts were introduced in January. So there seems to be a trend of increase, but the question is this sustainable with all these other pressures? Of course, the growth estimates that IMF and many of the economies are giving us show that there's going to be more growth. That would result in also more demand. And hedge funds are also betting on higher prices. So I think the $55 average was what many people said would happen for Brent for Brent crude in 2017. It's possible it'll probably go up to 56, 57. I don't think we'll go to sub 50 oil. I doubt.
So the General Secretary, who's Nigerian, of course, I mean, as you were mentioning a bit earlier, you were telling me the figures there, compliance by non-OPEC members, which include Russia and the likes of Mexico, is at what, 50 to 60% just now. So he'll be very happy with that.
He had a meeting in Vienna and said that was 60%, but he's not happy with 60%. You know, he wants it to go up to 100%. Obviously, that is likely to happen. But if you can get 70%, even 90%, which is what they say they have now, is quite good. But they will probably have to sustain it beyond the initial 6-month period.
Our business analyst Bode Oshosami talking there to David Glencourse in London. To India now, and